So I seen this story, not this story, but a similar story a few months back. And it was to do with, I think it's the Irish Times. Yeah, the Irish Times group earlier this year purchased Rip.ie. And this, I was wondering at the time, again, looking at it through a dark lens because the world is dark at the moment. And it's a perfectly legitimate to explore potential meanings in things, in instances, right? What could follow from certain instances? It's perfectly legitimate to explore them and imagine into those lenses based on what you're seeing around the world, right? And you can also do it with a positive lens in that. You can put on whatever lens you want, right? So I tend to be a little bit more grounded in the darker, the underbelly of humanity, right? In terms of thinking. And we all have that to a degree, right? Some people don't. They only want to see the nice things, and that's fine. That's a beautiful thing. And never would you want that to be tainted in someone. But you would protect them from it too if it's going to lead them into silly situations, right? And that is your duty to do that. To people that you care about at least, right? And to people that are just a bit wayward. Not the bad people, but the good people that are just maybe confused. But the dark lens I started looking at it through was reading that story that a newspaper or the Irish Times group had purchased RIP.ie, which is like an online register for people for deaths in Ireland. Just around the time that there's also talk of excess deaths following COVID and the introduction of pharmaceuticals, biological creations, bizarre stuff, right? And many people engaged in that social experiment, and it's now been linked with excess deaths. How legitimate it is based solely on the medical stuff, the pharmaceutical interventions. Who knows the full details and the full numbers, right? We can only speculate and assume based on the little bits of details and data that comes out, right? But there's certainly a question there that needs answering, and that's perfectly legitimate to ask that too. It's not crazy to ask questions about that. If there's more people dying than usual, would you not want to know the reasons behind that? Or are you willing to allow people to put blinders on you and convince you to believe that there's only certain answers that are legitimate, and any other speculation on alternative answers that needs to be shamed and shunned without proper investigation? That's absolute lunacy. That is total lunacy. To shield yourself from potentials. You're denying yourself reality there in instances. So I was thinking, what will be done now with RIP.ie following or coupled with the reporting on excess deaths in Ireland and across many, many countries, but Ireland specifically here? So I was thinking, is this a way of amplifying death notices, making them potentially more available to other people in newspapers or whatever the case is? Or would it be used as a way of limiting the availability of these death notices to people? And it seems we've gotten our answer. So in the Irish Independent today, RIP.ie is set to introduce a €100 fee to list death notices on the site from next month. Who's going to pay this fee? As if that really matters, okay? I don't believe that matters for the conversation here, but it says that RIP.ie has confirmed that they are to introduce a €100 fee for funeral directors to list death notices on their site from January 2025. They said it won't be asking for fees from the users. And that's a little bit dark in one way. In one way, you could look at it economically and say, well, isn't that fair enough that you're not going to burden people who are looking at death notices, which tend to be like family members, extended family, friends, and people from the same village or town that are going to have a look for their area and maybe further afield. So is it not only right to not burden them with the fee of paying for that privilege, or it's not even a privilege then, but for the fee of paying for that knowledge, that information? But on another hand, you can look at it and say, well, if the funeral director has a choice between coughing up €100 from his own pocket or her own pocket and not doing that, they're probably less likely to do that naturally. Because that's an economic argument as well. Like the funeral director, each time he decides not to do it, will be getting to hold on to €100 of his own money. And you might say, well, look, they're good people, they have hearts and that, but they would definitely pay the money. But there's no definite. Okay, so it's in the funeral director's best interest, financially at least, to not upload these debt notices onto Rip.ie. So could this be a mechanism for limiting the awareness of the figures of deaths, like the frequency of deaths? It could, of course. Right? And it's not crazy to ask them questions. It's absolutely not crazy. And it sounds like I'm trying to convince myself there, but it's not for anyone listening. It's perfectly legitimate to ask these questions up until the point where you get further information that may affirm or contradict what you're thinking on it. And you accept either one if it's true, right? You're not tied to it ideologically. You're just asking questions.